My name's Laura. I've been teaching Italian for a good part of my life, and at 42, I was pretty settled in my ways, comfortable, you might say, with the everyday hum of school bells and chalk dust. My life took a turn, though, not a dramatic one, but like when you catch someone's eye across a crowded room and just know something's going to happen. I met Marco on a typical soggy March afternoon. His daughter, Isabella, was one of my private students. A bright kid, always eager, always had her homework done on time. That day, she was scribbling away in her notebook when Marco first walked into my classroom to pick her up. "Sorry for barging in like this," he said, standing awkwardly at the door. His hair was a mess from the wind, and his coat was dripping all over the floor. "No worries at all. We're just wrapping up," I replied, giving him a reassuring smile. "Isabella's just finishing up an exercise." Marco nodded and leaned against the doorframe, watching us. "She talks a lot about you, says you make learning fun." I chuckled, closing my books. "I try. Italian is a beautiful language. It deserves a little passion, don't you think?" "Yeah, I guess," he shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm Marco, by the way." "Laura," I said, extending my hand. Isabella packed her bag, chattering about the lesson and how she couldn't wait for the next one. Marco listened, his eyes flitting between her animated face and mine. It was clear he was a devoted dad. As they were about to leave, Marco paused. "Hey, if you're not busy this weekend, there's a little community gathering. Food, music, pretty laid back. Maybe you'd like to come? Bring some of that Italian passion to the party?" I was taken aback, not just by the invite but by the straightforwardness of it. "Sure, why not? Sounds like fun." "Great. It's a date then," he said, a bit too quickly. "I mean, not a date. Just, a friendly outing." "Got it," I laughed, easing the awkwardness. "A friendly outing." At our first real outing, as the community band played some old tunes and kids ran around, Marco opened up a bit more over plates of food. "I'm a widower," he said, his voice a bit lower, a bit rough around the edges. "Been raising Isabella and her brother Matteo on my own. He's 12, a real firecracker." I nodded, not sure what to say, my heart going out to him. "Sounds like you've got your hands full." "Yeah, it's been tough, but we manage," he replied, poking at his food. "They're good kids, they make it easier." Over the next few dates, our conversations deepened. We met at small cafes, walked through parks. It was during these walks that I met Matteo, a lively boy with his father's eyes and an infectious laugh. He took to me quickly, showing me his sketches and asking about Italy. Then, Marco introduced me to his mother. She was a stout woman with a sharp tongue but a warm smile. "So you're the lovely lady making my son smile again," she said, sizing me up, but not unkindly. "Glad he's found someone who can put up with his cooking." Becoming part of a new family wasn't something I planned meticulously, it sort of just happened, naturally unfolding as if it was meant to be. After Marco and I had been seeing each other for a while, things started to get serious. Before I knew it, I was not just his girlfriend, but a significant presence in his and his kids' lives. One Saturday morning, we decided it was time I moved in. Packing up my life into boxes felt strange, but right. Marco and the kids helped me move my stuff into their home, which was soon to become our home. "Hope you've got room for all these books," Marco joked as he lugged in yet another heavy box labeled books. "Better make room, or I'm building a library in the backyard," I shot back, laughing as we shuffled around the living room trying to figure out where everything would go. Matteo and Isabella seemed excited, each of them showing me their rooms and where I could maybe put some of my things. "You can put some stuff on my shelf if you want," Matteo offered, pointing to his cluttered bookshelf filled with model cars and old comic books. "Thanks, Matteo. Maybe I'll just add a couple of books, eh? Leave room for your cars," I replied, ruffling his hair. The real test came when I met Marco's mother, Rosa, under the new context of moving in. She came over that afternoon, her eyes scanning every move but her tone warm. "So, you're setting up shop here now, huh?" she asked as she watched me arrange the kitchen. "Yeah, Rosa, making it official," I answered, unsure how much territory I was allowed to mark as my own. "Well, just remember, Marco likes his eggs over easy, not scrambled," she pointed out bluntly, but with a twinkle in her eye. "I'll keep that in mind," I smiled, appreciating her mix of humor and directness. Living together meant adjusting, a lot of it. Marco worked long hours, and I found myself spending more time with Matteo and Isabella. I helped them with homework, we cooked meals together, and gradually, I wasn't just Laura anymore, I was a part of their daily routine. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when I felt like I was stepping on toes, overstepping unseen boundaries. But for every awkward moment, there were a dozen others filled with laughter and shared secrets. We were finding our rhythm, slow and steady. Marco and I had our moments too, learning about each other in ways only possible when you share a space. "You know, you make this place better," Marco said one night as we sat on the couch, exhausted from the day. "I just want you guys to feel like it's still your home," I said, my head resting on his shoulder. Becoming a stepmom wasn't easy. There were no guidelines or rule books. But as I fell asleep that night, listening to the quiet hum of the house, I knew this was where I was meant to be. It was chaotic, messy, and absolutely perfect in its own imperfect way. In that moment, that was enough. Rosa and I used to have the best times together before the stroke changed everything. She'd come over and we'd spend hours in the kitchen, sharing recipes and gossiping like old friends. Those days filled the house with laughter and the warm aromas of Italian dishes we both loved to cook. But life, as it does, took a sharp turn. When Rosa was paralyzed, everything shifted. Marco moved her into our home, and naturally, I stepped up to take care of her. It seemed like the right thing to do, she was family, after all. However, Marco's help was strangely absent. I thought maybe he was just overwhelmed with work, but as days turned into weeks, his distance grew more noticeable. Caring for Rosa was a full-time job. She needed help with everything, and I did it all without a second thought, clinging to the warmth we once shared. But her condition seemed to harden her a bit, and our light chats turned into terse, functional conversations. "Did you add the basil to the sauce?" Rosa would ask sharply, watching me from her wheelchair as I cooked. "Yes, just like you taught me," I'd respond, trying to catch her eye and maybe spark a smile. But smiles were hard to come by those days. As time went on, Marco and I spoke less and less. One night, I tried to bridge the gap. "Marco, we hardly talk anymore. Is everything okay?" He was silent for a moment, then his words cut through the air. "I'm just tired, Laura. It's been a lot, dealing with everything." I nodded, feeling a chill. His eyes didn't meet mine. The disconnect between us was palpable, but I pushed it aside, focusing on Rosa and the kids. Years passed, and Rosa's presence in the house became the new normal until her death. It was sudden, despite everything, and the funeral was a blur of black dresses, somber faces, and whispered condolences. But the real shock came after the funeral, when Marco's true feelings spilled out during an argument. "You're just here taking up space now, Laura. I only put up with you because you were useful, but look at you, what use are you now?" His words were like slaps, leaving me stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Marco, how can you say that? After all these years?" "It's the truth, Laura. You were here for the kids and my mother, that's it." He turned away, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. The kids, now practically adults, started showing their true colors too. Isabella, once sweet and friendly, became cold and cruel. "You really have no one, Laura. You're just here because we pity you," she'd say, her words dripping with disdain. "Matteo wasn't any kinder. Why are you still hanging around? You're just taking up space," he'd sneer whenever we crossed paths in the hallway. Their words, their rejection, it gnawed at me daily. I felt isolated in the very home I had poured my heart into. The family I loved and cared for had turned against me, seeing me as nothing more than a temporary fixture, now obsolete. One evening, I was setting the dinner table, hoping for a quiet meal, when Marco walked in, his face like a storm cloud. "Why are you still trying to play happy families, Laura? You know it's all a show," he snapped as he threw his keys on the table. I paused, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the last fork down. "I don't understand, Marco. Why are you so angry with me? You were part of the setup, like furniture. Useful for a time, and now just taking up space," he retorted, opening the fridge and staring into it as if it held the answers to more than just his hunger. I stood there, silent, trying to process his harsh words. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Isabella and Matteo came in, their faces mirroring their father's disdain. Matteo grabbed a soda from the fridge, his eyes mocking. "Yeah, Laura, maybe you should just accept it. You're like an old couch we should have thrown out ages ago." Isabella laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. "Seriously, Laura. Even you have to see it's true. You're just the leftovers now." Their cruelty sliced through any defense I had left. I turned away, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. "I've cared for you all, loved you. How can you treat me like this?" Marco shrugged, dismissing my emotions with a wave of his hand. "Love? That's a strong word for just doing your job, don't you think?" The rest of the dinner passed in silence, at least on my part. Their words echoed in my head: leftovers, useless, old furniture. It was clear they saw me as nothing more than a temporary help that had overstayed her welcome. Life has a way of knocking you down when you least expect it. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my health took a nosedive. My legs, which had always carried me through long days of teaching and bustling about the house, suddenly became a source of constant pain. The doctors couldn't give me a straight answer at first, tossing around terms like chronic inflammation and possible degenerative issues, which meant little more than "get used to it." This change hit me like a brick. Teaching at the private school, a job I cherished and excelled at, became impossible. I had to resign, leaving behind not just my income but a part of my identity. At home, every step was a struggle, every task a monumental effort. I felt trapped in my own body and, worse, in a home where I was increasingly unwelcome. Marco's reaction to my situation was like a cold splash of reality. One morning, after I had struggled to clear up the breakfast dishes, grimacing with every move, he walked into the kitchen. He watched me for a moment, his face twisted not with concern, but irritation. "Why are you even trying to clean? You're just making a mess," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "I'm trying to help out, Marco. It's not like I can just sit around," I replied, leaning against the counter for support. "Help? You call that help? You're more of a burden now than anything," he shot back, his words slicing through the air and cutting me deeper than the pain in my legs. Marco and the kids spent money like water, flaunting new gadgets and designer clothes bought with the inheritance. Me? I got nothing, not that I expected anything different at this point. Their lavish spending was a slap in the face, a constant reminder of where I stood in this family. On top of that, Marco and the kids loved to remind me that I was only in their house out of pity. "Don't push your luck, Laura," Marco would sneer. "Remember, you're just one argument away from being out on the street." Their words were like a cage, locking me in a life of quiet desperation. But one day, I stumbled upon a website for private tutors teaching languages online. My heart raced as I explored the possibility of teaching Italian again, reconnecting with a part of myself that I thought was lost forever. I dove into setting up my profile, my fingers trembling with excitement as I typed out my experience and qualifications. "Experienced Italian teacher, personalized and engaging lessons," I wrote. Before long, I was booking my first session. The thrill of teaching, of speaking Italian, of engaging with eager students, it all came rushing back, filling me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Each day, as Marco and the kids left, I transformed a corner of my room into a makeshift classroom. I started with a few students, but word of mouth spread fast. My schedule filled up, and I found myself teaching more and more. "You're really good at this, Laura," a student told me over a video call, their words bolstering my confidence. I started receiving glowing reviews, and my rates went up. As my reputation grew, so did my earnings. It was astounding. For the first time in a long time, I was making my own money, more money than Marco, even. But I kept this to myself. If Marco or his kids knew, they'd surely find a way to claim it or ruin this for me. One afternoon, after a particularly rewarding session, I sat back and let out a long, satisfied sigh. Just then, Marco walked in earlier than usual. He eyed my setup, a laptop, notebooks, Italian flags, and teaching aids scattered around. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "I'm teaching," I replied, my voice steady and calm, despite my racing heart. "Teaching? Here?" His confusion was evident. He hadn't expected this. "Who would want to learn from you?" "People from all over the world," I responded with a pride I couldn't hide. "Turns out, I'm quite popular." Marco scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Make sure this doesn't interfere with your chores around the house." "It won't," I assured him, turning back to my computer. His presence in my sanctuary irked me, but he soon left, muttering under his breath. That night, I lay in bed, a smirk playing on my lips. Marco and his kids could spend all the inheritance they wanted on fleeting pleasures. Meanwhile, I was building something lasting, something just for me. My online teaching wasn't just a job, it was my lifeline, my escape plan. I was no longer just the downtrodden stepmother, I was Laura, the sought-after Italian tutor, a woman with a plan and a growing bank account. That night at dinner, there was a tension in the air so thick you could almost see it hanging above the table. Marco and the kids were unusually quiet as I served the food, their eyes avoiding mine. I could feel something brewing beneath the surface, but nothing prepared me for the words that were about to slice through the last threads of our family ties. Marco was the first to break the silence, his voice cold and detached. "I got a promotion at work," he announced, not looking at anyone in particular. "I bought a new house, too." I paused, spoon midair, the news catching me off guard. "That's great, congratulations," I managed to say, though a sinking feeling started to form in my stomach. "Yeah, well, don't get too excited," Marco continued, his eyes now fixed on me with a hardness I hadn't seen before. "You're not coming with us." I put the spoon down, feeling suddenly like I had been punched in the gut. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said," Marco snapped. "You're not part of the plan, Laura. You stay here. I'm moving with the kids. We need a fresh start." The room spun slightly as his words sunk in. Isabella giggled cruelly from across the table, her voice like a knife. "Yeah, who needs an old limping maid in a shiny new house?" Matteo chimed in with a smirk. "Consider yourself lucky we're not kicking you out on the street tonight." I looked from face to face, each one a mask of contempt and dismissal. My heart pounded painfully in my chest. "And the house? This house?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's sold," Marco said bluntly. "New owners will take over in a month. Maybe try to find a shelter or something by then." They all laughed, a harsh, grating sound that filled the room. I sat there, stunned, my hands trembling in my lap. This was their thanks, their repayment for all the years of care, of love, of sacrifice. As the laughter died down, I found my voice, small but steady. "I see. Well, then I guess there's nothing left to say, is there?" Marco shrugged, already disinterested as he turned his attention back to his plate. "Guess not." I stood up, my legs shaky but holding. I looked at each of them, their faces still turned towards their food, no sign of remorse or regret. "Enjoy your dinner," I said quietly, then turned and left the room. In my room, the gravity of the situation hit me full force. They were really going to leave me behind, discard me like an old piece of furniture. But as I sat there, a strange sense of relief began to wash over me. I was free, free from their cruelty, their disdain, their oppressive presence. It was not the freedom I had imagined or wanted, but it was freedom nonetheless. The day I left Marco and his children behind, I felt a strange mix of liberation and deep sadness. As I hauled my last suitcase to the door, Marco's bitter words followed me. "Hope you enjoy the flophouses, because that's all you can afford," he jeered, with a cruel laugh that echoed off the empty walls. His kids, Isabella and Matteo, joined in with their own barbs. "Good riddance. Now we don't have to deal with your pathetic limping around the house." I didn't bother to reply. What was the point? I had learned long ago that words were useless against their kind of cruelty. I walked out, letting the door slam shut behind me, shutting off the chapter of my life that had brought me so much pain. Moving into the apartment I had rented in secret felt like the first true breath of fresh air in years. It was a modest place, but it was mine alone. Here, no shadows of disdain would loom over me. No harsh words would cut through the quiet. Setting up my new home was therapeutic. I arranged my books, set up my small desk by the window, the new headquarters for my online Italian lessons. I relished the peace, the utter silence that came not from tension but from tranquility. The divorce was finalized soon after. I stood in the courtroom, facing Marco and his children for the last time. They smirked, confident and unrepentant. When offered alimony, I refused. "I want nothing from him, not now, not ever," I declared. "He and his children are strangers to me." Word of my teaching spread, and my schedule became packed with students from all corners of the globe. The income was more than sufficient, a sweet victory that was all my own. One evening, while sipping tea at my new kitchen table, a call from an old friend brought unexpected news. "Have you heard about Marco?" she asked, a tone of disbelief in her voice. "He's moved into a fancy new house, but guess what? He's already blowing through money like there's no tomorrow." I couldn't help but grin, shaking my head. "No surprise there," I replied. "He never did plan for the future." Rumors about Marco and his children's reckless spending didn't surprise me, but it was the catalyst I needed to put my plan into action. During the last few tumultuous months of our marriage, I had recorded several of their verbal tirades and cruel jabs, originally for my own records, in case I ever needed proof of their behavior. I sent the files anonymously to Marco's boss. The company he worked for had a strict policy against any form of harassment, and I knew they would take it seriously. It wasn't long before the repercussions came to light. One evening, my phone rang with Marco's number. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. The desperation in his voice was palpable. "Laura, what have you done?" he blurted out, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "You've heard, then? Sounds like your company didn't appreciate the way you treat people," I said calmly, a hint of vindication coloring my words. "You've ruined me. They demoted me, slashed my salary. How am I supposed to pay the mortgage now? We could lose the house," he raged, his words tinged with panic. In the background, I could hear Isabella and Matteo, their voices loud and accusatory, blaming me, the same way they always had. "This is all your fault, Laura. You're going to pay for this." Matteo's voice cut through the phone. I couldn't help but laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that had been absent for far too long. "Now you might end up in a flophouse, isn't it ironic?" I said, the irony not lost on me. "Please, Laura, help us. We're sorry. We didn't mean any of it. We'll do anything," Marco pleaded, desperation making his voice crack. "You don't get it, Marco. I don't want your apologies or to help you. I'm done being your maid, your punching bag," I retorted sharply. "But we're family," he tried again, a last-ditch effort. "We were family," I corrected him coldly, feeling a surge of empowerment. "Goodbye, Marco." I hung up the phone, blocking his number along with Isabella's and Matteo's. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a closure I hadn't realized I needed. News reached me a few weeks later through mutual acquaintances that Marco and his children were indeed evicted after failing to make their mortgage payments. They had to downsize significantly, and the kids, now adults, had to find jobs to support themselves. The thought of them scrambling to make ends meet while I was contemplating buying my own house brought a smirk to my face. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, about showing them that I was no longer the person they thought they could trample over. I turned my attention back to my computer, to a message from a student thanking me for my inspiring lessons. It warmed my heart. I had found my place, my purpose, and no one could take that away from me.